Jake Bennett had imagined a peaceful life when he moved into the Willow Creek neighborhood. A newly sworn-in sheriff in a small county, he craved calm after years of chaos on the streets. Willow Creek's neat lawns, white picket fences, and carefully trimmed hedges promised a fresh start. But something about this neighborhood felt off. From the moment Jake unpacked his vintage bike in the garage, he noticed the watchful eyes. Neighbors greeted him with polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, and the HOA board's warnings came fast and cold. The first letter arrived on a crisp Monday morning, slipped under his front door. Its neat print on official HOA letterhead read, "Dear resident, it has come to our attention that your bicycle, parked on the side of your driveway, violates the community's vehicle storage ordinance. Please remove the bicycle or face penalties." Jake frowned. The bike wasn't parked on the street or in any prohibited area. It was tucked neatly beside his garage, out of sight from the road. Shrugging it off, he set the letter on the kitchen table, expecting the matter to fade. But the letters kept coming, each one more aggressive, each more vague about what exactly Jake was doing wrong. Sometimes it was about his lawn, other times about his mailbox, and once about the color of his curtains, which Jake knew wasn't covered by any HOA rule. Ms. Carlton, the HOA president, was especially relentless. He'd caught her eyes several times during community meetings, sharp, calculating, cold. She never addressed him directly, but made sure he knew he was under scrutiny. That evening, Jake sat on his porch, the fading sun casting long shadows across the quiet street. His bike leaned against the fence, gleaming red and black in the dying light, a symbol of his freedom and escape. But now it felt like a target. Why so much trouble for a guy who just wants to live quietly? He muttered to himself. The neighborhood dogs barked in the distance, and the gentle hum of sprinklers broke the silence. Yet beneath the surface, Jake could sense something brewing, a quiet storm ready to break. That night, as Jake prepared to turn in, he noticed movement outside his window. A shadow flickered near the bike. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, heart pounding. Nothing, just the wind. Still, unease settled in his gut. The next morning, Jake found a new letter. Pinned to his door, this one stamped "Final Warning." Failure to comply with the community guidelines will result in further action, including fines or property removal. Jake's blood ran cold. Who was behind this? The letters were anonymous, but he knew. It was the HOA, and Ms. Carlton's message was clear. Conform or suffer consequences. That's when Jake decided to keep his secret. No one needed to know he was sheriff now, at least not yet. He would watch. He would wait. And when the time was right, he would reveal the truth behind Willow Creek's pristine facade. Because in this neighborhood, peace was a carefully maintained illusion, and Jake was about to shatter it. The morning after the final warning letter, Jake's unease grew heavier, gnawing at the edges of his calm facade. He tried to focus on his routine. Mornings were his sacred time for riding the old bike through quiet streets, clearing his mind before stepping into sheriff duties. But today, the driveway felt emptier than ever. His bike was gone. Jake blinked, scanning the space where the red and black vintage bike had rested so peacefully the night before. Now only the faint outline of tire marks on the concrete remained, a silent ghost of the ride he'd hoped to take. He circled the driveway, eyes sharp for clues. No note, no footprints, no sign of forced entry to the garage. Just gone. His stomach clenched. The HOA warnings suddenly felt like threats. Someone wanted to make a statement, and Jake's prized possession was the target. Jake's phone buzzed. It was a text from a neighbor, Maria, one of the few who had greeted him warmly when he first arrived. "Did you see? Bike's missing. Heard strange noises last night." Jake called her immediately. "Strange noises?" he asked, gripping the phone tightly. "Yeah," Maria whispered. Around midnight, loud shouts and a truck backing out. Didn't see faces, but it felt deliberate. Jake's mind raced. Whoever took the bike wanted him to notice, wanted to unsettle him. But why? What had he done to stir such quiet hostility? He decided to visit the local pawn shops and online marketplaces in case someone was trying to sell the bike. The bike was unique, easily recognizable, and impossible to miss. Hours later, at a small shop on the edge of town, Jake spotted a familiar frame tucked in a corner. His bike. Before he could react, a shadow moved behind the counter. The shopkeeper, a grizzled man with wary eyes, crossed his arms. "Looking for something?" he said, voice low. Jake didn't answer. His eyes narrowed. "Where'd you get this?" The man shrugged. "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, Sheriff." Jake's jaw tightened. He left the shop, heart pounding with a mix of anger and suspicion. Someone was testing him, and he had a sinking feeling the HOA was involved. Back home, Jake found a small envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a single card, written in elegant, cold handwriting. Next time, no warnings. The message was clear. The bike was just the beginning. Jake's mind flashed back to Ms. Carlton, the way she looked at him, the sharp tone in her emails. He'd underestimated her resolve. That night, Jake stayed alert. His sheriff's instincts kicked in as he monitored the street from his porch. The neighborhood, so still and picture-perfect during the day, seemed sinister under the moonlight. Suddenly, headlights flickered down the street. A black SUV slowed near his house, then sped away. Jake grabbed his phone, noting the license plate. He was being watched. He called his deputy quietly. "Keep an eye on Willow Creek," he said. "Something's coming, and it's bigger than a missing bike." As the night deepened, Jake realized this quiet neighborhood was a powder keg. The bike was a message, but he didn't yet know the full meaning. One thing was certain. He wouldn't back down. He had a badge, a mission, and a secret the HOA would regret discovering. Jake's days blurred into restless nights as he pieced together the threats against him. The chilling note, the black SUV, the disappearing bike, it all wove into a dark tapestry he couldn't ignore. Yet he kept his sheriff's badge close, to his chest, determined to outwit whoever was trying to unnerve him. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake stepped outside his house, hoping for a breath of fresh air. The neighborhood felt heavier than usual, like the calm before a storm. Then, a faint glow flickered near the community's trash bins at the far end of the cul-de-sac. Curious and cautious, Jake approached, heart hammering in his chest. There it was, his bike, burned almost beyond recognition. The frame was twisted, the tires melted into a blackened mess. The faint smell of smoke lingered in the air. Jake's breath caught. Someone had escalated. A crowd soon gathered, neighbors whispering nervously. Some avoided his gaze, while others offered awkward apologies, clearly scared of the consequences. Ms. Carlton arrived swiftly, her icy composure unshaken. "This is a regrettable incident," she said, voice cold and measured. "We will investigate, but I trust the community will abide by the rules and not escalate matters further." Jake's eyes narrowed. The way she said it, like she was steering the narrative, didn't sit right. Later that night, alone in his dimly lit living room, Jake studied the charred remains he'd salvaged. His vintage bike wasn't just a possession. It was a symbol of freedom, of a life reclaimed from the chaos of law enforcement. The burning was a message, a warning that he was crossing lines someone didn't want him to cross. That same night, a knock rattled his front door. Jake peered through the peephole. No one. But taped to the door was a single piece of paper, scrawled with a chilling phrase. "You ride for justice. We burn for power." Jake's pulse quickened. This wasn't random vandalism. This was war. He called his deputy, briefing him on the situation. "Ms. Carlton's HOA isn't just petty," Jake said. "They're organized and dangerous." The deputy's voice was grave. "Be careful, Jake. You're poking a hornet's nest." The following days saw Jake stepping up patrols, not just for his community but for himself. He installed security, cameras, monitored neighborhood activity, and reached out discreetly to trusted neighbors. Among them was Maria, the kind neighbor who'd tipped him off before. Over coffee, she revealed whispered stories of HOA members pushing out residents who dared to challenge them. Rumors of intimidation, property seizures, and threats circulated like a dark cloud. Jake knew the fight was bigger than a burned bike. It was about power and control. His sheriff instinct screamed, "Find the root, and fast." One night, as he reviewed footage from the new cameras, a shadowy figure appeared near his driveway. The figure paused, then slipped a small package beneath his front porch. Jake's hands trembled as he retrieved it. Inside was a USB drive. Plugging it into his laptop, Jake's eyes widened at what he found. Emails between HOA board members discussing handling Jake's resistance and plans to intimidate other dissenters. The plot was deeper and darker than he imagined. Jake leaned back, steeling himself. He wasn't just fighting for his bike anymore. He was fighting for the soul of Willow Creek, and he was ready to bring the fight. Jake sat at his kitchen table long after midnight, the soft glow of his laptop screen illuminating his tired face. The emails he'd uncovered on the USB drive were damning. HOA board members plotting harassment, intimidation, and even illegal property seizures. This was no ordinary HOA dispute. This was corruption, and it was deeply rooted. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes scanning every word again. The fact that he was sheriff gave him an edge most residents didn't have, but that edge had to stay hidden. If the HOA knew who he really was, their attacks would only get worse. So far, Jake had been careful. He hadn't told a soul about his badge, not even Maria, his closest neighbor and ally. He was a newcomer in the sheriff's office, still earning respect and trust from his deputies. Willow Creek was supposed to be his sanctuary, a place to recharge, but instead it was turning into a battleground. His phone buzzed with a text from Deputy Harris. "Any leads? This sounds bigger than harassment." Jake typed back quickly. "Found emails, corruption, intimidation. I'm digging deeper." After securing the USB drive, Jake switched into investigative mode. Using his sheriff training, he cross-checked names, financial records, and property documents. Ms. Carlton's signature was on multiple questionable contracts that benefited a mysterious developer who stood to gain from clearing out residents. Jake's gut told him the HOA was a front for something bigger, a land grab disguised as community management. He had to act smart. If the HOA suspected the sheriff was among them, they'd double down on their tactics. So Jake kept his badge under wraps, observing silently, like a predator waiting to strike. One evening, as he rode his car slowly through the neighborhood, Jake spotted Ms. Carlton leaving the community center. Her face was calm, but her eyes flickered with something sharp. Dangerous. He parked a block away and activated his phone's camera, capturing her meeting with a man in a dark suit. They spoke in hushed tones, exchanging an envelope that glimmered in the streetlight. The man's smile was cold, and Ms. Carlton's grip on the package was firm. Jake's pulse quickened. He was on to something major. The next day, Jake returned to the neighborhood meeting, this time with a different purpose. He blended in with the crowd, watching faces carefully. Some residents looked anxious, others angry, but many seemed resigned, at ease. The meeting's close. Jake overheard a whispered conversation between two board members discussing accelerating the plan and removing obstacles. Jake knew the next move had to be decisive. That night, alone in his home, Jake took down his sheriff's badge from a hidden shelf. He stared at it for a moment, his secret weapon, the truth he kept locked away. Being sheriff wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about protecting people, and these people, his neighbors, were being betrayed. He packed his badge carefully, slipping it into a hidden compartment in his jacket. Then he sent a message to Deputy Harris. "I'm going undercover in my own neighborhood. Keep backup ready." Jake wasn't just a homeowner anymore. He was a guardian, a watchful protector ready to expose the darkness behind Willow Creek's polished facade, and he would do it alone, for now. But the shadows were closing in fast, and in Willow Creek, trust was the most dangerous game of all. Jake knew he was swimming in dangerous waters. The more he dug, the darker the secrets the HOA buried. Sitting in his dimly lit home office, he scrolled through more leaked emails and scanned through the HOA's financial records he'd managed to get his hands on. The picture that emerged was worse than he imagined. Ms. Carlton wasn't just some overbearing HOA president. She was the puppet master of a carefully orchestrated plan to seize control of the entire neighborhood's property. The developer she'd met in secret was no small-time businessman. His plans were ruthless, and they had the HOA's board members in his pocket. Jake's fingers trembled as he read an email from a board member named Caldwell, suggesting, "If resistance persists, we should consider stronger measures." Measures. The word hung in the air like a threat. Determined to find more concrete proof, Jake arranged a meeting with Maria, the neighbor who had been quietly observing the board's shady dealings. Over coffee in her cozy kitchen, Maria's voice was low but urgent. "I've heard rumors. People being pressured to sell their homes, others threatened with fines they can't pay. Some have already left, too scared to fight back," she said, eyes darting nervously. "But nobody talks openly because they fear what the HOA might do next." Jake nodded. "That's why I'm here, to stop this before it gets worse." Maria handed him a folder filled with unsigned letters and anonymous complaints she'd collected from scared residents. Each detailed harassment tactics, broken mailboxes, sabotaged landscaping, even slashed tires. Jake's jaw clenched. The HOA was using fear as a weapon, and it was working. Back at home, Jake mapped out the evidence. He cross-referenced names from the complaints with board meeting minutes and discovered something alarming. Caldwell, the aggressive board member, had secretly acquired several foreclosed properties in the neighborhood. He stood to profit enormously if the current residents were driven out. Jake realized Caldwell was the HOA's real power behind the throne, the dark force pulling strings from the shadows while Ms. Carlton acted as the public face. The pieces clicked together when Jake uncovered an internal email from Caldwell marked confidential that read, "Proceed with eviction notices next week. Ensure no one suspects our involvement. Use the fines and violations as justification." The HOA was planning a sweep, a legal purge of residents who refused to comply. Jake's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore. It was a full-scale assault on the community. That night, Jake reviewed the security footage from the neighborhood cameras he'd installed. The images showed a group of unfamiliar men moving stealthily around several homes, including his own. They wore dark clothing and carried equipment that looked suspiciously like tools for breaking and entering. The threat was no longer abstract. It was at his doorstep. Jake called Deputy Harris. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every family in Willow Creek. We need to act fast." Harris's voice was steady but grave. "I'm coordinating with the state. If this goes public, there'll be an investigation. But you need to be careful. This HOA won't go down without a fight." Jake glanced at his hidden badge and steeled himself. The time for subtlety was over. He would expose the entire scheme. But the question lingered. How deep did this conspiracy go, and who else was watching his every move? As dawn broke over the quiet streets, Jake knew one thing for certain. The battle for Willow Creek was just beginning. Jake's phone vibrated relentlessly as dawn painted the sky with soft pinks and blues. Messages and calls from Deputy Harris, concerned neighbors, and an anonymous tip flooded in. The fight for Willow Creek had exploded into chaos faster than Jake anticipated. He quickly scanned a new message. "Meet me at the old community hall. Come alone. We need to talk about the truth behind the HOA. No signature. No explanation." Jake's instincts screamed a trap or a desperate plea. With his sheriff's badge concealed beneath his jacket and a concealed handgun at his side, he slipped out the door, the morning air crisp and sharp. The old community hall, once a bustling gathering place, had fallen into disrepair. It's cracked. Windows and peeling paint mirrored the neighborhood's fractured peace. Jake's footsteps echoed as he approached the heavy wooden door. Inside, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man in his late 40s, disheveled but determined. His name was Robert, a former HOA board member who'd recently resigned under mysterious circumstances. "Jake," Robert whispered, eyes darting nervously, "you're in deeper than you know. The HOA's reach goes beyond property disputes. They're connected to organized crime, laundering money through real estate deals. Ms. Carlton isn't just a pawn, she's a key player." Jake's mind raced. The layers of deception ran deeper than he feared. Robert handed him a thick envelope filled with documents, financial records, emails, and photographs linking the HOA to a known criminal syndicate. Before Jake could ask more, the old building's heavy door creaked open. Footsteps approached. "Time's up," Robert muttered, pushing Jake toward a back exit. "They know you're here." As Jake slipped through the shadowed alley behind the hall, a black SUV roared to life in front of him. Tires screeched. Shots rang out. Jake dove behind a dumpster just as bullets shattered the night's fragile silence. Heart pounding, Jake pulled out his phone to call Deputy Harris. The line crackled. "Jake, are you okay? We picked up gunfire near the hall. I'm alive," Jake whispered, "but they're coming after me hard." Back at his home, Jake's wife Sarah paced nervously, unaware of the full scope of danger her husband faced. Jake knew he couldn't protect her if this escalated. He made a decision. It was time to reveal his true identity. At a hastily called community meeting, Jake stepped forward, badge gleaming in the harsh light. "I am Sheriff Jake Bennett," he announced, "and I'm here to stop this corruption." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Eyes widened as he detailed the conspiracy, the threats, the crimes hidden behind the HOA's smiling facade. Ms. Carlton's face turned pale, but quickly hardened. "You have no proof," she sneered. Jake raised the envelope. "Proof enough to bring down this entire scheme." The crowd was divided, some shocked, some skeptical. But many rallied behind him. Suddenly, the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. Chaos erupted. In the shadows, unseen enemies prepared their next move. Jake clenched his fists. The war for Willow Creek had only just begun. Darkness swallowed the room as the power abruptly cut out. Panic rippled through the crowd like a wildfire. Whispered fears escalated into uneasy murmurs. Jake could feel the tension tighten around him like a noose. In the pitch-black silence, footsteps pounded outside the building. Heavy boots, fast and determined. Someone was coming. Jake's mind raced. The HOA's reach was now a full-on siege. "Stay calm," Jake commanded, voice steady despite the adrenaline roaring through his veins. He pulled out his flashlight and flicked it on, casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. "We're not alone," he warned the assembled neighbors. He reached for his concealed radio and whispered, "Deputy Harris, perimeter compromised. Request immediate backup," Static hissed in response. Suddenly, the building's front door was slammed open by a group of masked men wielding crowbars and flashlights. The crowd gasped, backs pressed against the walls. Jake stepped forward, hand on his holstered gun. "This ends now. Leave or face consequences." One of the intruders sneered. "You think your badge scares us, Sheriff? We're the real power here." The tension snapped like a wire stretched too tight. A scuffle erupted. Jake moved with trained precision, disarming a man who lunged at him. The crowd scattered, some screaming, others frozen in shock. Amidst the chaos, a sharp crack echoed, the sound of a glass window shattering. Jake caught a glimpse of Ms. Carlton slipping away through the back exit, clutching a briefcase. "Stop! Her!" Jake shouted. But the masked men blocked the path, creating a wall of intimidation. With backup delayed, Jake knew he had to improvise. He grabbed Maria, pulling her toward a side door. "We need to get out. We can't let them silence us," he said urgently. Outside, the night was thick and cold. The streets, usually peaceful, now felt like a war zone. Jake dialed Deputy Harris again, whispering, "Hold on. Backup's 5 minutes out. Stay alert." As they ducked behind a parked car, Jake noticed a glint, a camera flash from a second-story window across the street. Someone was filming. Not just neighbors, but someone hired by the HOA to intimidate and control. Jake's thoughts flicked to the burned bike, the anonymous threats, the surveillance. This was a calculated campaign to terrorize. Minutes dragged like hours. Then, lights. Patrol cars flooded the street, their sirens slicing through the night. The masked men scattered, retreating into the shadows like ghosts. Jake felt relief flood through him, but knew the fight was far from over. Back at the community hall, deputies rounded up the intruders, revealing faces some neighbors recognized, contractors tied to Caldwell's developer network. Jake turned to the shaken residents. "This isn't just about your homes," he said firmly. "It's about standing up against corruption, intimidation, and fear." The crowd, galvanized by his courage, began to rally. But Jake's eyes searched for Ms. Carlton, now vanished into the night. The battle lines were drawn, and Jake was ready to take the fight directly to the heart of the HOA. The dawn broke over Willow Creek with a tense silence. Jake stood at the edge of the community center's parking lot, watching as the last remnants of the HOA's hired muscle were led away. In handcuffs, the neighbors gathered around, their faces a mix of relief and lingering fear. But Jake knew the war wasn't over. Ms. Carlton was still out there, slipping through the cracks of justice like a ghost. He held the briefcase she'd dropped during her frantic escape. Inside, Jake found contracts, wire transfer receipts, and a dossier that revealed everything. The full extent of the HOA's illegal dealings, including bribery, money laundering, and collusion with criminal syndicates. It was the evidence needed to dismantle the entire corrupt network. Deputy Harris approached, nodding. "With this, we'll have enough to bring her down." Jake glanced at the growing crowd and then at the gleaming badge pinned beneath his jacket. He was more than a homeowner now. He was their sheriff, their protector. But just as the victory seemed within reach, his phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen, chilling in its simplicity. "You think you've won? The game isn't over. Watch your back." Jake's heart sank. The shadows of Willow Creek were far from gone. Determined, Jake made one last call, to the state attorney's office. He handed over all the evidence, ensuring the legal hammer would fall hard. Days later, the community held an emergency HOA meeting. This time, the atmosphere was different, tense, hopeful, and vigilant. Ms. Carlton was escorted in, handcuffed and defiant, her icy stare fixed on Jake. "You can't destroy us," she spat. Jake met her gaze evenly. "Justice isn't about destruction. It's about protection." The state attorney announced the dissolution of the corrupt HOA board and the appointment of a temporary community council composed of trusted residents. The crowd erupted in cautious applause. As the meeting ended, Jake stepped outside and found Maria waiting. "Looks like Willow Creek finally has a chance to heal," she said softly. Jake nodded, a rare smile breaking through. But then, in the corner of his eye, he spotted a familiar black SUV parked a few streets away, silent, watching. The fight for Willow Creek's soul wasn't over. It was just entering a new chapter, and Sheriff Jake Bennett was ready.